These are fascinating times for Israel and the Jewish people. I just published a column entitled Israel versus the Jews, where I discussed Prime Minister Netanyahu's trip to Argentina. When I was on a Holocaust educational journey this past summer for a book that I'm writing, where we visited some of the saddest, most awful places on earth. We arrived in Hungary 3 days before Prime Minister Netanyahu was the guest of the Hungarian government. And the local community was extremely upset because they felt that in order to build relationships, bilateral, diplomatic, and economic relationships between Israel and Hungary, Prime Minister Netanyahu was not going to address two issues. That he would overlook what the local community definitely saw as an anti-Semitic campaign by the government using pictures of George Soros all over Hungary, which I saw myself, as the New York banking Jew trying to pull the strings of the government from afar, kind of connotations of the protocols of the elders of Zion. And they said to Netanyahu, you have to bring it up with the prime minister. And then they also are upset that Hungary has never really taken responsibility for their role in the Holocaust, meaning that Admiral Miklos Horthy was the ally of Hitler. And it is true that the Holocaust did not happen in Hungary until April 1944, when the Nazis invaded Hungary, but Horthy was still Hitler's collaborator, and the Hungarians were Hitler's allies throughout the entire war. There was never an occupation of Hungary, because Hungary was always an ally. And then my friend Rabbi Gestetner's here. His father is from near Budapest. Between April and August of 1944, 550,000 Hungarian Jews were murdered. And towards the end, it was a Hungarian Nazi party, the Arrow Cross Party, that was enacting a lot of these killings. And when Prime Minister Netanyahu went to the Holocaust Memorial that is on the banks of the Danube, you may have seen the pictures. I was there 3 days before him. It consists of bronze shoes of the whoever has been to Budapest has seen it. It consists of bronze shoes of the people who were shot, Jews, murdered by the Hungarian Nazis, not by German Nazis, and their bodies dumped into the Danube. Prime Minister Netanyahu went to Vassar. They took very moving pictures. The problem is, when you go there, it doesn't say a word about Jewish victims. The word Jew does not appear anywhere on the monument. So the local community said, Prime Minister Netanyahu, you got to bring this up. It didn't come up a lot. The trip was a success. Hungary is becoming a much stronger ally of Israel, as is Poland and any of the Eastern European countries that we visited. I had the Deputy Prime Minister of Poland here in this house just a week ago. We were talking about Israel and Polish relations. So the fear was that Prime Minister Netanyahu now goes to Argentina, that housed many. How many ex-Nazis were given sanctuary by Argentina after the war?
Hundreds.
5,000.
5,000. Okay. So the fear was, and of course, Debbie and I hosted Isser Harel, founder of the Mossad. He's even shorter than me. He passed away. Great hero of the Jewish people, founder of the Mossad. He is the one that led the operation to capture Adolf Eichmann on Garibaldi Street in Buenos Aires, who was working for Mercedes in 1960. There's an amazing, amazing exhibition about it in the Museum of Jewish Heritage down near Ground Zero, and I suggest that you see it before the exhibition ends. But we hosted him at Oxford in front of 1,000 students. He told the entire story. He was granted sanctuary by Argentina. So would Prime Minister Netanyahu bring up the issue when he went to Buenos Aires? Or would it once again be an issue of the Jews versus Israel? Local communities who are beginning to feel that Israel's interests don't necessarily align with theirs, because a lot of these countries have governments that are not, that even if they're not openly anti-Semitic, they really lean towards overt anti-Semitism. And what would Israel say about them? Now, my son Mendy went and researched this for me and found out that there were 3 incidents of previous Israeli prime ministers who were in a very similar situation. Just when the president of Poland visited Israel for the first time, Yitzhak Shamir was president. Was it 91, Mendy? When was it?
Yeah.
By the way, Tara, I can't drop, please. What year was it?
91.
And what did Shamir say? Shamir introduced him by saying,
He said that the Holocaust would accompany Polish history to the end of time.
in the Prime Minister of Israel's introduction of the Polish president to the Knesset, he said, I'm introducing the president of Poland, and that the memory of the Holocaust will accompany Poland to the end of time. Does that sound like a warm welcome? Time magazine wrote, it sounded like the prime minister was cursing him more than introducing him. Then we had Begin, 1982, correct? The terrorist bombing of the Jewish restaurant, the kosher restaurant in Paris called Goldberg's. Whoever remembers that? 8 Jews murdered. What was it?
Goldenbergs.
Goldenbergs. And Mindy, what did Begin say at the time? Tell me.
He said that he would help the Jews arm themselves if France would protect them.
Knowing that his relationship with France was critical, bilateral relationship between Israel and Israel and France, still Begin gave a speech and he said that if France does not protect its Jews, he will encourage the local Jewish community to organize paramilitary groups in Paris to protect the Jewish community. Now imagine the Prime Minister of Israel intervening in domestic affairs to say something like that. Now why was that? Because the Prime Minister of Israel saw himself as the leader of all Jews. Now, Netanyahu, I know personally, is one of the proudest Jews I've ever met. I started hosting him in Oxford more than a quarter century ago. I'm not going to go into personal stories because I've never been allowed to tell them, but I can tell you, I watched him in private settings with students, anti-Semites, meetings that we arranged for him. I've never seen a prouder Jew. So there's no question about his pride. But now that Israel understands, wait a second, we got big problems. We have Hamas to our west, and they're a genocidal organization whose very constitution says that we are going to annihilate not just the Jewish people in Haifa and in Beersheba and in Yerushalayim, but we're going to kill Jews where, quote, wheresoever they are found. That's in the Hamas constitution. This organization, parenthetically, just took out a full-page ad this past Saturday's New York Times opposing a PR campaign by the Qatari government using Jewish companies and Jewish leaders to whitewash their financing of the terror group most responsible for the murder of Jews in the entire world, Hamas. Israeli Jews are dying in Israel, and American Jews are whitewashing them here in the United States. We took out a full-page ad. And now you've seen all the stories that have resulted from that ad of Jewish leaders who had these secret meetings that are now coming out and repudiating those meetings. There were probably 15 stories over the past 48 hours, and there were going to be more. One ad that we took out this past Saturday, and there's going to be more ads that we're doing. And it's not against any individuals. A lot of these leaders are dear friends of mine. It's against the government of Qatar that finances the murder of Jews, that has given Hamas at least $1.4 billion since 2012 and largely financed the Gaza war of 2014. And I said to my wife, the reason I'm going to do this, even though many of my friends are involved in that Qatari effort, dear friends, I said to my wife, we remember. We took our children to Israel during the war. We remember those boys. We went to Tel HaShomer Hospital twice in 2 days, and we gave them sunglasses and perfume, and we remember the boys with no arms. And we remember the boys with no legs. We remember their mothers sleeping on cots because they're boys. They were all 18. Each one of them had a mother sleeping, not a girlfriend, not a wife. Their mothers. We remember the boy who had no eye. Our children can picture him exactly. The boy who's 18 years old wearing glasses, who took a bullet to the head that went outside the back of his cranium, and his mother joking with him and making him laugh, saying he looked like a cyclops, in Hebrew, and he was about to be medevaced to France for an emergency. I remember those boys. And I said to my wife, I'm not going to allow the people who paid for this to get away with it. So Israel says to itself, we have Hamas to our west, we have genocidal, crazy Iran to our east, we've got Hezbollah to our north. Is our problem Hungary and their recognition of the Holocaust? Is our problem how many Nazis lived in Argentina? Is our problem whether neo-Nazi, to quote Steve Bannon, clowns are marching in Charlottesville? And Prime Minister Netanyahu said, hey, condemn this, condemn this, condemn this. People, and he's probably thinking to himself, to be fair to him, because I'm a big fan of the Prime Minister. I think he's done a phenomenal job leading Israel. Whatever your own personal views are, that's my view. But with all that, Prime Minister Netanyahu barely condemns the neo-Nazis marching in Charlottesville, because probably in his mind, and I'm just guessing, he's thinking to himself, that's my issue? These thugs screaming Jews will not replace us in Charlottesville? My issue is bombs going off in Tel Aviv buses and 100,000 potential Hezbollah rockets, and I need the United States, and I need allies, and I need Europe, and why am I going to, intervene in this? So you now have, it's fascinating, for the first time in history, that's why we're all so confused, especially since Charlottesville. For the first time in modern Jewish history, you have white supremacists and nationalists who kind of like Israel, but hate Jews. who treat Israelis like they're the white country in the Middle East holding back the invading Muslim hordes. We don't want immigrants in our country. And Israel understands that. They are the bulwark of Western civilization out in this wasteland called the Middle East. Israel's the white country. So they support Israel and they hate Jews. We've never seen anything like this. So we're all sitting there scratching our heads like, who could even figure this out? Should condemn Charlottesville. And my view on that was that Israel's more than the Jewish state, which it definitely is. And Israel's more than the Middle East's only democracy, which it definitely is. And Israel's more than the only bastion of human rights in the entire Middle East, which it definitely is. And Israel's more than the most moral country facing all these genocidal threats in battle, the most moral country on earth, given the level of threat that it faces, which it definitely is. But it's more than all that. Israel is a light unto the nations. And it has to be a light unto the nations. It has to be that human hope of what America has always tried to be. We as Americans know that this country is not just the world's largest economy, the world's most powerful military in world history, but America is the beacon of righteousness, democracy, and human freedom to the world. And who taught America all those ideals? Who taught Thomas Jefferson to enshrine the Declaration of Independence that people are created equally in the image of God? Who taught America about a one-person, one-vote system, which says that everyone's equal, where oligarchs, where the people with the financial resources, they don't have more of a vote than people who are less fortunate? Or the Nobel Prize-winning economists, they don't have more of a vote than people that don't even know how to spell economics. Who taught everyone about that equality? It's from the first chapter of Genesis. Israel's the light unto the nations. So the question is, given these threats and that Israel being kind of survival mode, how does it become that light unto the nations? And that's especially a question that is so strongly framed in our time, where there are so many Jewish people at the head of this, at the Trump administration, incredibly pro-Israel Jews. You have Jason Greenblatt, who we saw yesterday at Ambassador Onderwood's reception, Orthodox Jew, and one of the fine gentlemen that I know, David Friedman, the ambassador, exceptionally fine gentleman. You have Jared Kushner, whose family has been so utterly devoted to Jewish causes forever, well before he or his father-in-law entered politics. Let alone the many other Jews who were at the top of the administration, Gary Cohn or Steve Mnuchin. How can the Jewish people be a light unto the nations? And especially these times of moral confusion. And we all seem very confused by what's going on. And the Charlottesville thing brought it into stark relief. Because you see, my opinion was, do I believe that white supremacists, nationalists, and neo-Nazis are a threat to the Jewish people or Israel or America today? Are they a real threat? No. They're killers. They drove a car into a woman. They are killers. But are they a threat like the Islamists? Like the Islamic terrorists? Like Iran or Hezbollah or ISIS? Of course not, right? I mean, only a fool would say that. So why the need to pressure the president to speak out with moral authority and condemn what happened? For one reason, my friends, because that incarnation of evil called Nazism, regardless of how impotent it may be today, and it is still potent, let's not ever say it's not. It's just compared to radical Islam, it's not the same level of threat. But that incarnation of evil took the lives of 6 million Jews. And if we can't call that evil, if we ever equivocate, regardless of the security questions, then evil has no meaning. In other words, the role of the Jewish people is not just to exist and survive in Israel, God willing, which must happen, and not just to practice our Judaism here in the United States. We have to be that moral voice, and in the absence of that today, I think there is so much moral confusion. I want to finish this small introduction and go into this conversation by adding the following. You know, I just did the most important trip of my life over the past few weeks with members of my family to the killing fields of Europe. I always wanted and felt the necessity of doing a trip to Europe about the Holocaust, which would involve total immersion, where you don't even look for the glimmers of hope, where you just go from one place to another where our people died and where they were murdered. Tara, can you make sure the phone doesn't ring, please? Thank you. I've always wanted to go. And because our organization, for those of you who attended our May 21st gala, where we wrote a Sefer Torah on Elie Wiesel's name with his son Elisha doing the final Kaddish at the dinner, and where Elisha wrote the last letter. There are some pictures of it right here. Here you'll see one of the pictures. We're writing one of the last letters on the Sefer Torah. There's Marion Wiesel, there's Lynn Wiesel, there's Elisha Wiesel somewhere here. Elisha did the last letter. We took the Torah to Majdanek, Auschwitz-Birkenau, the Lodz Ghetto, Treblinka, Tikchin, Bialystok, Kozice, Bratislava, Vienna, Berlin, Munich, Dresden, Rome, Florence, any place that was touched by the Holocaust. And I have so much to say on that subject, and I gave a major speech about it in the Hamptons this past Shabbat as scholar in residence at the Hampton Synagogue. There's no time for that now, other than to crystallize one critical thought and one critical idea that permeated my trip. We started our trip at the Wannsee House in Berlin. We flew into Berlin and went straight from the airport. It's a 24-minute drive, according to Google Maps, to the Wannsee House, which is a suburb of Berlin. The Wannsee House is a beautiful villa built, I don't know, 130 odd years ago by a German industrialist. There are rumors that it was even owned by Jews. On Lake Wannsee, which is one of the prettiest places in Berlin, one of the prettiest places in Germany. The SS bought the house for the convalescence of pilots and SS officers who were too nerve-wracked by the war. You know, killing Jews can be a nerve-wracking experience. So on the 20th of January, 1942, Reinhard Heydrich summoned 15 heads of departments from around the Reich in a meeting that was overseen by Adolf Eichmann. And in the space of 120 minutes, they planned the annihilation of 11 million European Jews. And they only got, ultimately 3 years later, they would only get through like 60% of their plans. And we only know about this meeting because one of the protocols survived, and it was used as one of the most important pieces of evidence in the Nuremberg war trials and other trials, war crimes trials. By the way, if you can watch it, HBO did the most exceptional drama. It's called Conspiracy, starring Kenneth Branagh, where they follow it minute by minute. It's 2 hours, just like the meeting. They show the cigars that they smoked. They show the caviar that they passed out, as they discussed in very industrial terms, in terms like I would be discussing about, is the air conditioning working well enough in here, et cetera, which I hope it is. The annihilation of the Jewish people. We went to the Wannsee House. And then I wanted to start there, where it was planned, where the decision was taken. And then I wanted to drive to the places where it happened. And you know what struck me? I couldn't believe the vastness of it. I couldn't believe Hitler's vision for a continent-wide genocide. Do you understand? Can our puny minds even understand the magnitude of the Holocaust? Do you understand we were driving from, say, Majdanek, Lublin, overnight to Kozice in Slovakia, where my wife's family were murdered and escaped from the Holocaust? We were driving all night, 6-7 hours, and we left one place where they killed all the Jews, and we arrived at a new place where they killed all the Jews. Then we drive another 6 hours, and now there too they killed all the Jews. The vastness, the scope, I didn't understand. How do you plan a continent-wide genocide? Especially, Treblinka kills 900,000 Jews, and there were only about 150 SS guards there. Sobibor, 250,000 Jews, only about 25 SS guards. Belzec, 550,000 Jews, only about 40 SS guards. How do you kill millions of people with just a few SS? And this question has been debated by scholars, by historians. And that question was in stark relief the entire time. 3 questions were on my mind the entire time. That's what my book is now trying to address. Number 1, where was God? How did he watch this? And when you take your children on trips like this, and they're religious, God Almighty, if that question doesn't come up continually. Because if we're going to hold the Poles or the Czechs or the Slovaks responsible for watching this, or like Elie Wiesel spells out so compellingly in his book, The Town Beyond the Wall, which I always tell the man that I affectionately call Rebbe Eliezer was his most important book. For me, even more important than Night. If we're going to hold them accountable, as Elie Wiesel says in Town Beyond the Wall, how the Friends watched him and his family, because it's fictional, but it's really autobiographical. They watched him deported from his town, Sighet in Romania. That was just the neighbors. But God watched it all. And he watched it every day as they took the babies and the mothers. And he watched. And that was the first question. And the second question was, how do I teach this to my children and still have them love God? And the third question, how do you pull off a continent-wide genocide? I'm only going to address this last one because it pertains to Israel, and then we're going to have our conversation. Do you know how you do it, my friends? On the last day of his life, Moses, in Deuteronomy, in this long monologue that we're going through portion by portion every Shabbos until we'll complete it on Simchas Torah in 2 weeks. And unlike other religions, unlike Egypt that chose death, these giant pyramids of death, unlike even our brothers in Catholicism that will take the relics of saints and build whole churches around them. We saw the head of St. Catherine in Siena. Unlike religions that will even have a figure of someone being put to death as the first thing you see in their houses of worship, you must choose life. That you are a religion of life that never glorify martyrdom, never believe that dying for God is a mitzvah. If anything, you may sometimes be forced to, but never believe in it. Find a way to live. Only the living can feed the hungry. Only the living can clothe the naked. And only the living can give sight to the sightless. Stay alive. And Hitler used that first commandment of the Jews to choose life against us. He dangled it in front of us. He forced us. He shot a few people as they got into the train and said, well, a few of them died, but the rest of you, you think I'm stupid? You think I'm going to kill you all when I'm fighting a world war on two fronts? You don't think I need slave labor? If you get on the flipping train, we're going to deport you to the east, and you still may live. You know the worst thing that I saw on this entire trip? The worst thing was Treblinka. Because the degree of the German deception was so complete. 900,000 Jews murdered. And do you know that Treblinka was dressed up as a train station? Do you know there was a ticket booth when you got off the train? They told them they're only departing for an hour so that they could be deloused. It wasn't even like Auschwitz, so they told them they had arrived at the camp. It was dressed up as a train station. There were signs showing the different departure times of trains. And he dangled in front of them. If you get on the damn train, you might still live. And then I'm walking through the brilliant Warsaw Jewish Museum that opened 2 years ago. It's one of the best Jewish museums in the world. You've got to give the Polish government immense credit for what they've done there. And you see them, it's not about the Holocaust, it's about hundreds of years of Jewish history, but the Holocaust gets a lot of attention, obviously. And I come across a manuscript this big written in Yiddish. It was found in Auschwitz after the war, and it was one of the most haunting things I've ever seen. This is not me speaking, it's not a historian speaking. This was a member of the Sonderkommando, the Jews who were forced to operate the crematorium at Auschwitz. And he wrote on a tiny little parchment in Yiddish. It was found after the war. He said, I'll never forget the faces of the Jews as we put them into these chambers and then locked the door behind them. I'll never forget the look of futility on their faces, where they said to themselves, after everything we endured to stay alive, I can't believe that I've arrived here, where there is finally no hope. Hitler coerced us, shot us, killed us, starved us, but still held out the hope. Maybe it won't be you. That happened to the guy next door to you, but maybe it won't be you. And what have we learned? when they dangle the hope of life in front of you, never put your life in anyone else's hands. Never trust someone with your life. When Moses said choose life, he meant you choose life. So when Hamas holds out a little carrot and says, look, our charter says we're going to kill you all, but if ceasefire, if you stop bombing us, and we may let you live. It's not about not believing them. It's about never placing your life in someone else's hands. And President Obama, with the best of intentions, because those people who think President Obama was an enemy of the Jewish people in Israel, I disagree. I am not into questioning people's motives, and I'm not into character assassination or demonization, not against Trump and not against Obama. It doesn't even help, and it violates Jewish values. We judge people by their actions and their actions only. We don't give a damn what their motivation is. Have you done good or not? That's the only question. We don't care what your intentions are. But when Iran says, yes, every day we say we're going to kill all the Jews, but if you give us $150 billion, we might not for 10 years. Never place your... And now, as Israel ponders the same thing, that is the great lesson that I learned. The obligation to choose life means that you can never place that choice in someone else's hands. It's your obligation. And that's why you see there were 3 great responses to the Holocaust. 3 major responses captured in 3 of the most famous personalities. And by the way, the Holocaust is being forgotten. Some of these people I'm about to mention, you may not even heard of them. There were 3 major responses to the Holocaust by the victims of the Holocaust. There was the Warsaw Ghetto, Judenrat, run by Adam Chernyakov, who amazingly actually has a tombstone. He took poison in July 1942. He ran the Warsaw Ghetto under the Nazis, obeyed their commands until they told him he had to turn over 20,000 people for deportation, children. And he went into his office, put himself at a desk, which you can now see at the Warsaw Jewish Museum. It's the exact same desk. And he took a cyanide capsule. The first response was suicide. Kill yourself. Don't resist. Don't cooperate. Die. The second response was one of the most infamous Jews of the Holocaust, whose legacy is debated till today, Mordechai Chaim Rumkowski. Rumkowski ran the Lodz Ghetto, 275,000 Jews, barely any survivors. He was the ultimate collaborator, worked with the Nazis up until August 1944, did all their bidding, and gives the most infamous speech of the Holocaust by a Jew. September 1942, we went to the exact spot. I found the pictures. We went to the spot where he gave it, where he famously told all the Jews of Lodz, I've been given an order by the Nazis to deliver 10,000 children to them tomorrow. Give me your children. Your children are like a gangrenous limb. It's not their fault. But if we don't cut off the limb, if we don't turn the children over for annihilation, you will die next. We can save ourselves. Turn over your children. The response was mass suicides throughout the ghetto the next day. And some people turning over their children. And some people fighting and resisting. And then is the glorious example of Mordechai Nalevich, one of the greatest Jews of history, who on the 7th of April, 1943, addressed 700 fighters in an underground bunker at Mila 18. And he said to them, tonight, we will not choose between life and death. Tonight we will choose between death and death. All of us will surely die. And only maybe 10 or 20 people who heard that speech lived. But we will choose how we die. We will take some of these bastards with us. We will make the dream of resistance in the ghetto a reality. The jumpers on 9/11, we remember them all. The thud, the thud, the thud. The terrorists can say you're going to die in a 2,000-degree jet fuel-fired inferno, but you still have a choice. No, I won't. I will choose how I die. No terrorist has any control over my choices. My friends, that's what the Jewish people are now facing. And that frames my conversation for tonight. that the Jewish people will be a light unto the nations and a people that choose life, especially before Rosh Hashanah.